Good morning, everyone. You may be seated. So when I was in sixth grade, I developed a love for making movies. Every weekend, every summer day, I'd get a group of my friends or the kids from the neighborhood together. We'd pull out some costumes, some props, and my parents' old VHS camcorder, the big heavy type that sits on your shoulder. And we'd get together and start working on our next great film. We made all sorts of films: comedies, martial arts movies, spy movies, horror films, cooking shows. There was no genre that we didn't touch. There was no story too ridiculous either. Everyone took their turns being an actor, being a director, a set designer, costume maker, and more. And we had a ton of fun, laughing and joking and being creative and just really bonding together in the movie-making experience. There was only one small problem with it, that none of our films were any good. I mean, sure, they were good enough for us. You know, we'd put them on and we'd laugh hysterically about what we had made, and we subjected our parents to endless screenings of our work. We loved watching them and seeing our creativity come to life, but if I'm being honest and totally objective about it, I have to admit that they were pretty terrible. None of the films would have been interesting to anyone outside our group unless you have some special love for awkward teenage jokes and bad acting and even worse special effects. The thing that I learned during that time, or have kind of learned over the years, is that there is a big difference between loving something and planning for it to succeed. You see, we never had any plans for our films. Everything was off the cuff and improvised, because improvisation was creative, it was fun, and it was easy for sixth graders to pull off. But it meant that everything we made was kind of directionless and meandering. Instead of each scene doing its part to move the story forward, each line of dialogue taking the viewer on a journey deeper and deeper into the film, building up to a compelling climax. Instead, the scenes were just kind of a mishmash of going this way and then maybe that way, different conversations and events that may or may not have been related to the overall story, and actors who each had a different idea of what they wanted to make that day. And of course, we also had no editing. Everything that happened in front of the camera made its way into the final cut, and every take was both the first and last take for that scene. So if someone made a funny joke during what was supposed to be a suspenseful scene, or if someone's costume fell off during an action sequence, it all stayed in the film. You know, one of the keys to good movie making is good editing. Good editing is like pruning a tree. You cut away the weaker growth and the branches heading off in the wrong directions, and that leaves more energy for the stronger branches to grow where you want them to grow. If you neglect that process, the tree or the film will just end up as a tangled mess. So over the years, as we grew older, getting people to turn out to film the next movie got harder and harder. People moved away, or people got new hobbies, and no one stepped in to replace them. Love for the movie by itself wasn't enough to sustain the filmmaking. We had been doing it the same way for years, but not really noticing that the energy was slowly dissipating until we just sputtered to a stop. Without results to be proud of, without something to show the world, the community just slowly disappeared. And by ninth grade, my days as a director were done. Christ Episcopal Church is a community of people who love this parish, who love this community, who love Christ, and who want to do his work in the world. Every Sunday, that love is so obvious on the face of the people as they pass the peace. That love is obvious in the voices of the people as they sing. That love is obvious in the hands that prepare food for coffee hour, that set up the altar and the linens, that maintain the building and the gardens, that teach the children and the youth. But recently, the lessons of my filmmaking days have been on the top of my mind as I watch my son Seth take his own steps into storytelling as an author and a filmmaker himself. And as I think about those lessons in relation to our church, I can't help but wonder to myself why my sermon won't stay on the podium. I also wonder to myself, what can we do to ensure that we are both loving the community and also planning for it to succeed? It's been brought up many times over the last few months, but the urgency of the matter calls for us to repeat it over and over. Right now, Christ Church is not on a sustainable path. Our income has been lower than our expenses, and it's been that way for many years. The size of our congregation has been shrinking slowly year after year by a person here, a couple people there, and that's left us tens of thousands of dollars in the red. And it's not a problem that we can overlook. It's something we need to speak honestly about. The good news, however, is that we do have the time and we have the resources to make a move. We have substantial gifts that have been given to the church. We are in a solid place to make a move and make a plan for the future. We can do something about where we are. At the moment, we may be driving towards a cliff on the horizon, but we're still a couple miles away. We can steer away from it. But for goodness sake, we need to get our hands on the wheel and make that move. As a community, we've always been great at supporting each other and maintaining the building. This community, every year that we do the Stewardship campaign, it continues to blow me away with their generosity, both to the parish itself and in the outreach work we do. The issue is that the people outside these walls don't know that, and they don't know who we are. So this is the year when we need to make a plan and when we need to make ourselves known. We need to have a vision of who Christ Church is and what Christ Church means in the University District. We need to know what story people are going to tell each other about that brick building on the corner of 47th and Brooklyn. And we need to ask who is going to be drawn to be part of this community of believers and activists and thinkers and worshipers who call this their church home. And when we know who will be drawn to us, we need to ask how we go find them or help them find us. Our love for this church is strong already, and our vision and plans must be just as strong. And yes, part of that plan may involve editing. The type of work that's done to remove movie scenes that don't contribute to the story being told, or the type of work done to prune branches that aren't bearing fruit, or which sap the strength of the tree. That's the same type of work done to ensure that the church is focused like a laser on where we want it to go. We don't have the luxury of continuing to do things the same way they've always been done. We don't have the luxury of arguing and endlessly discussing the details of parish life that slowly sap away our enthusiasm and energy. Every time we spend an afternoon in a committee discussing what is the proper ratio of mayonnaise to mustard in the ideal deviled egg, or whether it's more sacramentally appropriate to polish candlesticks in a clockwise or counterclockwise motion. That's just time that we've lost from our race to become relevant to the University District. In everything we do, we need to be asking ourselves, is this helping us achieve the vision of where we want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? And if it's not, we need to cut it out and not spend our resources, our time and energy there. So now I've said all this, and you may be sitting back thinking to yourself, well, gosh, Todd is right. The church leadership really needs to come up with a compelling vision of where we're going and put us on the right path. Well, I've got some good news about that, and I've got some, let's not call it bad news, but it is slightly complicated news. The good news is I think you're absolutely right. I, too, have a lot of faith in the leaders of our church. Time and time again, the leaders of our church have shown that they are thoughtful, they are prayerful, they're passionate, and they possess a myriad of different talents and skills. I, too, strongly believe that the leadership of this church can help point us in the right direction and make this church a vibrant place in the university district. But here's the complicated news about the leaders of this church. If you want to know who the leaders of that church are, these brave, thoughtful champions of the church, the people we're relying on to do this work and lead us into the future, then simply turn to your left, turn to your right, look down at your own hands. These are the people, these are the leaders who are going to be responsible for this work, for taking us forward. When I come up here once a year to talk about stewardship, usually my talk is something about being stewards of money, recognizing that our finances come from the skills and the time that God has given us, and that we're responsible for using that money not only for our own comfort, but for the advancement of God's kingdom on earth. And this is absolutely true, and the proper stewardship of our financial gifts is a crucial part of our spiritual maturity and our walk with God. I also often talk about being stewards of our time, recognizing that our time on earth is also a limited resource given to us by God, and that we honor this gift by using it in the way that God has directed us to. This year, I want us to also consider the fact that we are stewards of a great opportunity. This building on this corner, in this neighborhood full of need, in a time of great anxiety and isolation, represents an enormous potential for good. We have a great opportunity in this church to make it grow and to be a meaningful place, have a great impact on people's lives. There's so much that we can do, and we're also have been blessed with the time, the talents, and the seed money through the gifts we've received to do this work. But when God has given us this great opportunity, we need to make sure that we're making the most of it. I don't know how each of you will do that. God has given us each a unique toolkit of money, time, skills, and imaginations. And what you individually can bring to the project is going to be different from the person next to you. Only you and the Lord know how much you can contribute, or can know how you can contribute and how much you can contribute. However, I know, at least for me, frequently when I think about how much I can contribute and what the Lord thinks about how much I can contribute are often pretty far apart. God wants us to stretch into some pretty uncomfortable places, and that can involve writing a check that makes you feel a little bit nervous, or may involve talking to someone when you're feeling kind of shy and you don't know that person, or it can involve putting in a little bit of extra work on a weekend when you'd really just rather be at home on the couch watching TV. But the good news is that we'll all be doing it together, and we're doing it in service of a greater goal. We're going to be writing the script of Christ Church's next 10 years together. We're planning out our scenes, and we're taking this opportunity we've been given to tell an amazing story of faith and redemption in the heart of one of the most exciting communities in Seattle. And people are going to flock to be part of that.